everybody. Welcome to episode 7 of Empowering Educators. My name is Kacey Forks. I'm here with Chad Anderson. We've got some special guests in the house today. We are at Bernie High School, coming at you from the Texas Hill Country. Chad, what are we talking about today?
So we have 3 of our teachers that have done a presentation, and it's titled "Do This Before You Quit." And I guess I want to say that I think it was very effective. This was done 3 weeks ago, and to my knowledge, no one that showed up to the presentation has quit.
Woohoo!
And there was also 3 administrators who also are still here. So I think based on that, no, seriously, it was a highly attended training that the teachers offered here, and all day long I was getting, hey, they did such a great job. Hey, y'all need to have them on their podcast. And I was like, yes, we definitely do. So,
and very much needed, I think. Sadly, 40 to 50% of teachers quit in the first 4 to 5 years of the profession. So it is a very difficult job, as everyone knows, and I think more so now. I think the climate has shifted, kids have changed. People say that all the time, but it's true. Like, things have changed. It's very different, even just, with COVID, but even just from 10 years ago. So I think it's something that it is important to talk about, how we maintain, our sanity in this profession, because we all get into it for the right reasons. Nobody goes into teaching for the fame or the money or anything like that. We do it because we love the kids and we want to make a difference. Yeah.
So the focus of our podcast has been to provide teacher support. So we've used them a lot, mostly as coaching conversations, but also the idea is to empower our teachers as teacher leaders, which y'all have stepped up and done. And so I know I've been able to work with y'all, with the 3 of y'all at various points over the last few years to offer support, but I think it's more powerful when you are able to offer support to your peers. And so I think what you offered was very timely, and just some of the research, we did a little research just on the topic, and so some of the top things that teachers deal with: stress and burnout. Yeah. Right? Because I say a lot, and I've said on this podcast, teachers also teach. Like, there's so many other things they have to do in a class period. They're doing this, they're going there, they're doing this, and oh, by the way, I've got 37 kids in my classroom, and I need to address them. So it's a very fast-paced, hectic, and so some of the things you're probably going to hear today, based on our research too, is how to prevent that is setting boundaries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that work-life balance is huge with that boundary setting. Yeah,
so this is now 28. I started mid-year, 28 years ago. And one of the issues I had was I always said yes. The power of no. And not taking on, I had 4 preps. I was an athletic director. So it's long hours. I was also coaching. Oh, can you be a sponsor for this? Yes. Can you? And I was done. Yeah. After about 5 or 6 years. Yeah. I was just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So that's something that I've learned to try to help set those boundaries. And so our guests are going to be sharing some of their tools for that as well.
Yeah, I wholeheartely agree with the power of no. I learned that in this career as well. You have to learn how to say no. Not to everything all the time, right? But what it is, you have to set those or know your priorities. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
No, that's right.
But yeah, another one that I actually just kind of mentioned was that work-life balance, right? That's just huge. You've got to know, but which goes right along with setting boundaries, because you have to know how to leave work at work and come home and have time, your life, your family, the things that are important to you, and how to do that. And so you've got to learn to take time for yourself. That self-care we hear so often is so incredibly important.
And like you'd mentioned, our teachers being in it for the right reasons and for the kids. And so I know there are 2 specific teachers that I have coached on this year, because they were taking things home, they're working all weekend, and I was like, stop. You've got to. So I made them tell me it was going to be Sunday, they were going to take time. Actually, their husband had asked them to go do something. I was like, do that. Well, they ended up, instead of just the 4 hours, they spent the whole day. Saw her on Monday, went in and checked in. She looked completely different. She had because she took time for herself. I was like, you're actually going to maximize the time because you're going to spend less time doing your work because you allow time for yourself. So, super excited. We're going to go ahead and have our guests join in with us here. And so we just have a few questions. And so the first question, kind of like, so why did you become a teacher? And about how many years have y'all taught?
Yeah, your names, please.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Introduce yourself for us, please.
Okay, I guess I'm the designated first goer. My name is Jordan Blunt. This is my 8th year teaching. All 8 years have been here in Bernie ISD. And I became a teacher, I kind of just, I think like fell into it. You know, it wasn't necessarily what I had planned on doing post-college, but I found myself working in a school, essentially, as a teaching assistant for kids with behavioral issues on the autism spectrum. And I just fell in love with the moment that they learned something, and knowing that we had worked for months to do something that would be considered a simple task to most people, but the moment that they got it, I just, you know, and thought to myself, I could be doing this. You know, I could really do this. And, you know, so I got my alternative certification and somehow got hired at Bernie Middle School South. And I, you know, I remember that first week that I was in the classroom. You know, my first day of school, I'm like standing in front of like 25 8th graders taking attendance, right? And thinking to myself, who allowed me to be in charge of these humans? Like, who allowed this? Because I shouldn't be in charge. But by the end of the week, my husband and I were having like a date night, and he was just asking me like, so how was it? Like, tell me, how was your first week? And I told him like, this is the most fun I have ever had. And I didn't know that work could be this fun. It is the most myself I have ever felt. And I've been teaching ever since.
I love that.
So my name is Kelly Summers, and this is my 14th year of teaching, and I've taught 4th grade all the way up to seniors. Currently I'm in high school. So how did I get into it? Well, I homeschooled my 2 children through elementary school, and it was fabulous. They did everything I asked them to do. They stayed seated. They said yes ma'am, no ma'am. They did their homework. I had no parent email. Anyways, and then I thought, oh my goodness, this is the easiest job in the world, and this is exciting. I'm going to do this. And so at 40, I got certified to become a teacher, started teaching, and thought, what have I gotten myself into? And I taught at a private school for about 5 years, and I started getting really sick physically. And so I got whooping cough, I got precancerous cells, back issues I've dealt with, and that was because of a lot of things you said. So, so therefore, but I'm still here, and those you'll find out why.
Awesome.
All right, my name is Lindsay Johnson. I'd say this is my 14th year probably as well. So I was sharing earlier that I was just that kid who always loved school. I loved the school setting. I loved reading, writing. I loved everything about school, and maybe that is due to the fact that elementary through high school, of course I had the occasional bad teacher, but I was blessed with wonderful teachers. So much so that I knew in college I wanted to keep going, and I went to a PhD program at UT for languages and literatures, and I just always saw myself in academia, probably research and writing. But as part of that process, we had to teach, graduate students had to teach undergraduate classes. And I had a room of, big classes, 35 undergraduate students for English and Spanish, and I just loved it. I loved helping facilitate that. I loved talking to the students, and so I decided to kind of do a turn and also get alternative certifications so that I could teach younger grades. And I've been started in middle school, but I've been in high school probably for the last 10 years.
Awesome.
Well, I just realized, I'm so sorry.
No.
We all started in
We all
middle
started
school.
at
Yeah.
and we all started
And
at
we all
South.
started at Bernie Middle School South.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
We missed each other by a year.
Yeah, by a
but,
year.
Kelly was in my same hall.
Oh.
Wow.
We got to know each other over the printer. I remember. And very early in the morning, if I remember. It was like really early, outside of,
Oh.
Well, we are so glad that you guys are all here. You're incredible teachers, all of you. So thank you. We're glad that your path led you to Bernie High School. And you all kind of touched on things that brought you into this profession. What kinds of things now what do you find hard or difficult, or what types of things kind of steal the joy from teaching?
So I'm a perpetual, I would say, overachiever, in that one of my problems at the beginning of my career was that I got a lot of, like, I guess, self-assurance from how well I was doing as a teacher and how students perceived me and how much they liked my class. And it really meant a lot to me that I was seen as a good teacher, but that I actually was a good teacher as well. And so, you know, I'm a lot like a lot of members of my family. Like, if we're gonna do a job, we're gonna do it well. And like, there's no like, hey, I'm gonna halfway do this. I want to do it exactly, you know, to the best of my ability. And I think in a lot of jobs that's great, but in teaching, that can really lead to an imbalance of priorities and what's actually realistic in teaching. And so I really, I would say the first 5 years, the whole time I was in middle school, you know, it wasn't necessarily that I was taking work home all the time, but in the fact that like work still was coming home with me. It was what I thought about all the time. I was checking my email all the time, to the point where it became very, very unhealthy. And you know, I would say that I put a lot of pressure on myself. And going back to your question of like what steals your joy, I'll sometimes still find myself putting a lot of pressure on my performance as a teacher, how I'm seen as a teacher, how students see me in my class as a teacher, because I want to do it well. I don't want to spend my days being mediocre at something. And it got to the point back then that it became a tipping point where I just couldn't emotionally or mentally handle the pressure of being the perfect teacher all the time. To the point where I had this conversation with my husband of like, I don't think I could do this anymore, which was shocking to him because I told him like, I was born to do this. This is a job that I was born to do. And I still believe that. But that's something that steals my joy all the time of like, not necessarily like external things are really hard, but I think they contribute it to it. But I put the pressure on myself.
All that, yes. I would also add that, and I take full responsibility of this, I'm a perfectionist. I should say I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I would constantly take things the wrong way, and usually from the authority, such as an odd look or a walk through that, you know, and immediately I am a failure, an email comes through, it's about me, you know, and so I would take things personally, and so I was just an overachiever, basically. And then everything that Jordan just said, I really can't add to that. So it was quickly burning me out. I didn't realize it. I really didn't realize it until I started bad habits. And then my health got worse. I was like, okay, we got to change something.
Yeah, kind of echoing both of those things, and also, as I mentioned, you know, I've just been somebody who believes in public education. I love school, and so, as you mentioned, you know, students have changed a little bit. I mean, the climate has changed, environment, and so I think a lot of us teachers battle with a little bit of apathy in the class now, and you could attribute it to technology, cell phones. You could attribute it to, you know, the world surrounding them, but I think because we are kind of all perfectionist teachers and we want them to be engaged and we want, you know, to be seen as somebody who can inspire kids, that kind of that struggle against, you know, apathy can kind of weigh on you, and trying to find a way to reach, you know, kids that maybe don't seem involved in your class. But all of the other things as well. I mentioned I took on department chair for many years, or clubs and sponsorships and all those things that you feel for some reason are your duty to do, that can just really kind of interfere with your mission of putting the effort into your classes and to your students, and, you know, kind of balancing those roles of being a team player but taking care of your own classroom as well.
I also feel like expectations of teachers have dramatically changed, like, over the years. Like, even society's expectation, right? Like, you know, I'm not, like, I'm pretty, I think, compared to, I'm pretty brand spanking new out of the public education system, relatively, right? Like, you know, it's only been a little over a decade since I graduated from high school. And I remember growing up, I don't feel like my teachers were as, like, I guess, intense in the sense of, like, they had to do so much for so many people.
Like put upon maybe.
Yeah, like, I just remember my mind being blown as somebody who didn't go to college. Maybe, like, when you go to college, you're prepared. When you go to college to be a teacher, you're prepared for it because they teach it to you. But as an alt cert, you don't get it until you get in there and they're like, hey, you have to, here's all the IEPs for this class, plus the 504s. Plus, here's the kids who have their EB accommodations. And so it's almost every single person in this class has something that you have to make sure you cater to, and you have to track that data to make sure that you're showing that you're giving them those accommodations. But you also have to teach the kids who don't need accommodations as well and make sure you keep the rigor high, and it just snowballs, and it's kind of like, I am just one person. Like, how am I supposed to be all the things?
I can feel my blood pressure just listening.
Exactly.
I actually, honestly, and I just thought about this, but I remember I used to tell my husband, if I actually sat and thought about all the things I have to do during the day, like my day, like all the things that are expected of me, I think it would be too overwhelming. Like, I would just break down. Like, I have to compartmentalize it, or else it would. But I don't feel like it used to be like that. I don't think it, because, like, my grandmother was a teacher for 40 years.
Yeah.
And that was not her life. Like, at all. So, I know, I'm sorry. I just.
No, that's good. That's why I started at the beginning and said that y'all also teach. Like, there is so many, and that's why I think y'all's topic here is really powerful for teachers. And I would say a tipping point really probably is the post-COVID. I think just coming out of that, the needs of students, teachers, with all the expectations, that this is a very timely discussion that we're having. And Kelly, you made me think of something. We were talking about administrators coming into your room and then certain looks. And so, and I know that Kacey and I, like, we've been teachers, you know, we're in the teaching profession and recognize that. And so as coaches, we really try to stick to, if we come in, we're coming in for a purpose, that you've asked us to look for specific things, and then we leave whatever notes. And I know Kelly in particular, like last year I got to partner with you a lot, and I remember I was coming in looking for certain things, and your first question would be, well, how did I do? And I was like, well, I wasn't looking at that. I was looking at your students and this and that. And so I think I really try to acknowledge that, because I know how much teachers do care about what they do, and you're hearing it from these three, like their passion with what they do.
The pressure that you put on yourselves, and we are our harshest critics. You know, so many teachers really, so it is important that
Well, let's kind of turn to what do y'all do personally that can help educators to continue on in this profession. Y'all are at year 8 to 14 here in the room. We're 28 and
this is 19.
19. But it is that 3 to 5 year, and even getting into the 7-8 years nowadays. So if you just want to share some of that, what do you do personally that helps keep you going?
Okay, sorry, I feel like
It's on the paper.
So, and I think you're going to kind of see my explanation is a little different than Kelly and Lindsay's, simply because I think I'm just a little bit more like type B in a sense of like.
Before you go, but I think that's important to note, because everyone has to figure out what works for themselves. Right.
Yep.
You have to know, and so it's good if we see that difference, because and not everybody's not going to be the same.
Right. Yeah.
Also,
the things
too,
that work for them wouldn't work.
Before, another thing that I think the three of us, besides that we all that this all came together was the fact that we are different stages of our life too. And so
That is true.
Jordan can speak. She's got the children at home that are young, like not even really in the school system yet, other than pre-K and stuff. Lindsay's got middle school, high
I have
school.
middle school, high school, so I'm kind of in it, and I can kind of see through their eyes right now what they experience at school, what they expect of their teachers.
And then I'm an empty nester, so I don't know if that might help a little bit, because I'm afraid that some teachers might be listening and think, well, I don't relate to that, but just to know that we're all trying to figure this out.
That's good. That's a good clarification. Yeah.
I'd also like to clarify, this whole thing was Kelly's idea, and she's making me go first.
You're so gifted.
So just personally, my big thing that I had to remind myself when I kind of got to that tipping point at year 5 of like, I don't think I can do this anymore, was I had to remind myself what it meant to have fun in my classroom again. And what's funny is I'll see old students and I'll be like, yeah, but like I was not having fun that year. And they're like, what are you talking about? We had so much fun. I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm glad you did, because I was miserable. But like I had to stop taking myself so seriously. And I teach an AP course, which anybody who is involved in that college board world, actually all 3 of us are, knows that it's very rigid. It's, you have to essentially teach the test, and it's very easy in world history to kind of get stuffy. And I just don't allow myself to keep it stuffy just for the sake of them passing the test. And so this is probably a controversial statement for a lot of teachers, because I hear like kind of rebuttals against it a lot, but like I really look for ways to make class fun. And I know that it is not practical for it to be fun all the time, and I believe that. But ironically, I tell my students, like, who is the most important person in the room? And they'll be like, we are. And I'm like, no, it's me. I am the most important person. I don't do this for you. I do this for me, because I have to teach this class 5 times in a row, and I want to enjoy doing it the whole time. And I say it jokingly, but I honestly, I kind of mean it in a way of like, when you're having fun, the kids are having fun. They really are, because if you're bought into it, if you believe in it, they start to, even if they don't realize it, they buy into it as well. And just because they like having happy teachers. And you know, teachers who love their job, like that is something, that's feedback I get all the time. They're like, we can't believe how much you love your job, but it's because I look for ways.
So Jordan, that's a very powerful statement. What are some things, or what is something that you do that creates that fun for you and in turn their students?
I stop trying to make every activity rigorous. Sometimes it's just silly for the sake of culture. So like today, I'm teaching about the Industrial Revolution and the change between, you know, the cottage production to the factory farms, right? And so instead of, you know, just lecturing about it, and then we're doing an assembly line where they have to draw little faces, and all of them specialize in a part of the face, and they have to do it as quickly as possible. That's not the most rigorous activity, but you know what it is it gets them bought in. It clears the room a little bit, and it makes them remember the impact of
the connections that they're going to have to make when you present an FRQ is going to,
And they enjoy it. Right? And but it says so much when kids come into your class and they enjoy being there. They will learn more, they will want to learn more, they will want to do the things because it's you, because they have fun. I mean, 100%.
I was like, wait a minute, are you doing the urban game?
Not yet. That's next class.
So that's next, so that's another engaging. So Kelly, kind of pick up with that, and what do you do as an educator that helps you continue in this profession?
Okay, so it says on my notes here, growth and well-being. Okay, so let me talk on that, because I think that honestly was what turned it around for me. So the first thing is, I mentioned I was a perfectionist, so I had to really think about my mind, and I had to think about my thoughts. And I heard this quote recently, which I'm sure everyone else knows about but me. What you fill your mind with controls you. And when I heard it said so simply, I was like, oh my goodness, that is the truth. So for me personally, I read the Word of God. I memorize scripture. And so, and then I try to walk it out imperfectly, but I try. And one of the things that scripture has told me is to live in the present moment. And that's something that we hear all the time. But I never did. I always looked at the next class, the next lesson, what I need to get done, as opposed to who's in my circle, I should say, who's in that moment. And in that moment, they are the most valuable creatures on earth. And is it my husband? Then he's my focus. Is it my children? Is it my grandchildren? Is it my students? And when I started to realize that and then make that a priority, that thing we talk about as teachers that make life easier as relationships just begin to blossom, and just the most glorious things happened. A lot of times it's faking it till you make it. You know, you have to, so I'm choosing it. So that has been the greatest turnaround for me, was my mind. Then, on next to it, on top of it, whatever, part of it was food, body, and sleep. And I read a book, telling everyone about this book. Good Energy. Dr. Kacey Means, exactly. That has been so wonderful because it gives you all the data and science behind why you need to eat well, why people are sick, and why we need to move our bodies, why we need sleep. And it's just all in one book, and it's been wonderful. So these are things I've followed, for a while since I got the precancerous cells, the back problems, and the whooping cough my first year. Basically stress. And so I needed to counteract stress because I can't take away the stressors. They're there with us all the time. So I needed to make sure I was strong enough to handle it. And then by doing that, just everything else fell into line. And then the last thing would be I found a hobby. I literally believed lesson planning was a hobby. I did. I brought my computer home. Oh yeah, I was like, why not, But what's funny is it becomes the hobby because it was enjoyable. Lesson planning actually is enjoyable until you get it in front of the humans. And then you realize, wow, I live in utopia in my mind, But so I stopped doing that at home. And then we'll talk later about my tools because AI has revolutionized my life to the right way. I know there's controversy, but we've used it for the right ways. So, to make my life simpler and to do well. So anyway, so those are the things. I found a hobby. I'm gardening and making bread and grinding my own grain, and I'm just super excited about it. Loving it.
Something to look forward to.
Thank you. Yes. And I don't bring my computer home anymore, although I knew there was a snow day possible. I did bring it home, but that's okay. That's okay every once in a while. It's not like it's wrong.
Yeah.
And it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Okay, well, just to kind of resonate with a couple of the things that Kelly and Jordan have said, as we talked about, it's really easy to walk into school every day and be immediately overwhelmed by all of the tasks and things that can be perceived as negative. But so a couple years ago, I just really had to make a conscious effort to focus on positivity and gratitude. I'll plug a book as well. Kelly and I both read a book called The Energy Bus, and it's just, tips for living a more positive life. Jordan said something in our planning session for this PD session that really resonated with me, which is every kid has something positive about them, something you can find that you like about them. And so I think just trying to focus more on the people aspect of teaching instead of all the tasks that need to be done. So I was sharing that, it may seem cheesy, but every Monday morning I write something I'm grateful for. It has to, sometimes I try to do it about my profession, sometimes it is my family, and I stick it right by my computer at my desk, and so it's just a reminder all week that, there are positive things, and then just trying to be more intentional about, staying positive at school, because, every class, before I walk in the class, I smile, because I truly believe that, if you enter a room in a positive space, even if it's a fake it till you make it situation, that will carry over. And so, being more intentional about positive notes to students, trying to look for the good and trying to, as you said, enjoy the time that we're here. And so those are a couple of things I've tried to focus on.
That's great. All right, I think we can kind of get in just so for our listeners, so that you've talked about some specific things that y'all do, but what are some other tools that you have that you can just kind of mention that will support teachers with everything that they have to handle?
So like I said, this is my type B teacher coming out because I don't have any like organization systems really. All of the ones that I do have I stole from Kelly. And so simply because I love the idea of organization, it just doesn't help me at all. So I just do kind of broad concepts, right? So the first thing is if you are not in a subject matter Facebook group yet, join that Facebook group because when I first came to Bernie ISD, there was no curriculum at all.
Yeah.
Because we were so small, like at the time, there was no curriculum. It was follow the teaks, teach the teaks, and I was like, how do I do that? And they're like, teach it. And I was like, okay, what? How do I find that? You know, and so I discovered, you know, I guess this is very millennial, but like Facebook groups and like I'm in an AP World History teacher Facebook group. I'm in an AP Psychology teacher Facebook group. Yeah. And you know what those teachers do? They share everything, and I share everything, and it's almost like a giant international PLC because it's like this is what I do, this is what I do. Like, hey, how do you struggle? You know, there's this topic that kids aren't picking up. How do you teach it? And it's fantastic. So I highly recommend it, and they share their materials, and because like the rigor is important too, right? Like I emphasize fun and I try and interweave that, but like you also have to be able to challenge these kids, and I want to do that well, but you don't have to recreate the wheel. It's already out there. I would say my second one, and this is probably one that a lot of teachers are like, I'm not going to do that, but middle of the year and end of the year surveys.
Yes.
So powerful.
Yes, they are. And mainly because you don't know how you come off to somebody until they tell you. And good or bad, you want your kids to let you know how you're coming off as a teacher. Because if you don't accept that feedback, then I don't know how you could grow and actually enjoy the relationships that you're forming. And also, most of the time, the vast majority of the feedback I get is generally positive. These kids aren't trying to hurt my feelings. And usually they're trying to, and I put questions in there where like they have to tell me something nice, you know, and it's kind of nice because then you hear from kids that don't talk at all in your class and it's hard to have a relationship with them. You still are able to get like a little nice thing here, and it makes you feel kind of good, like, hey, I'm doing this and it's working really well and I'm going to keep doing that. This is not, but this is not working well, so I need to adjust that, and it kind of pinpoints it as well. And I think that helps too, because sometimes it's like, yes, I need to grow as an educator, but how? So those are my two tangible tools: Facebook groups, surveys.
Excellent tools.
Yeah.
Okay, so my biggest one, I think this is what Jordan is referring to. And by the way, when Jordan did borrow this, she always makes everything cuter. So then I borrow it back. Yes, you do. Is my lesson planning document, because Google Drive can be so crazy unorganized. I honestly call my Google Drive Google, you know, because everything's there pretty much. So I just created a document that keeps it all in line, and then I can link everything, and that just has helped streamline lesson planning. So there's that. The other thing is, even before that, I have this thing I do called problem solution. So I draw a T-chart. If something bothers me, I'm a feeler. My husband's very logical, where I feel things. So when I start to feel something that's bothering me, I like to just kind of reflect, okay, what's going on, and then I'll just jot down, this is irritating, what is it? And I'll let it sit there, and it'll come up again, and then I'll start realizing, okay, there's a problem, now I need to find the solution, and that's where I start asking my teacher friends, my instructional coaches, I start getting feedback from kiddos, I go to the internet, and then the solution comes. I'm like, whew, that's wonderful, and that's not a problem. And I was like, this is delightful. So that is where my systems and my organizations that I have today came from. That's this idea of problem solution. The other thing I mentioned earlier about AI, the reason I love AI is because of the rigor question. And since that's been something that we've been really pushing for a few years now, I will literally go through, I'm teaching AP right now, so I'll go through my topics and I'll go into AI, and these are what the kids are learning. Please help me to, sometimes it's a provocative question to get their mind stirred, and sometimes I put in, I just need a critical thinking, and then I go, make it more critical thinking, and all that. And those have been amazing, and so I've used it for that. Jordan got me on Facebook, and I wish I'd listened to her when we taught 8th grade together because I'm always so private. I'm like, I'm not putting myself out there on anything. And she kept doing these most amazing things. And I'm like, how are you figuring this out? So I come to high school and I barely keep my head above water. And she's like, get on Facebook. And I did. And oh my goodness, AP Gov is like amazing. So that has been a true blessing. Survey, love surveys. I think it makes you vulnerable, and the students love it. I've had kids tell me, thank you for really listening to my feedback. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness. So I'll tell the kids, guys, guess what? Survey told me this. A lot of you said this. This is what's changing. And the kids are just, the response just 100%. Deepens the relationship. And then, there we go. I'm done.
All right. All right, Lindsay?
A couple little tangible tools is one, like a lot of teachers, I teach, 5 preps this year. It's a lot to keep track of. I never have the same class twice, right? And so would I love to, if a lesson doesn't go great, completely reinvent it for the next year? Well, if I have new preps again, that might not be a reality. And so I really try to intentionally, every single lesson, every single day, I just write a little sticky about, because I do have hard copy binders. I'm trying to move everything to Google Drive, but it's been a process class by class. Just a note about didn't go long enough or students didn't respond, just so the next year, maybe there's an aspect of the lesson I have to redo, but I don't feel like I need to redo everything. Right. So just trying to kind of reflect more on lessons, even though it takes a minute or two, in the long run it saves a lot of time. There's a lot of things we're expected to do, such as, documentation online or parent emails, things for administration. And so I've just, I've made documents that I keep on my desktop that are not necessarily impersonal, but that can be copy and pasted. For example, if I have to document that a student is failing, just those little shortcuts, whatever that might be for yourself, to help kind of alleviate some of that outside. One thing we talked about in our planning session that I really admire from Jordan and Kelly is they both were telling the teachers, keep your work at work. And as we were talking about, work-life balance is so important. I have not been able to make that a reality for myself. The one thing I do at home is I teach dual credit English, which is a composition class. So I have 36 kids. To get through all those essays in a timely manner at school can be really challenging. So one thing I have done though is set a time limit at home. So
Great.
If I say I will dedicate 2.5 hours to grading this Sunday, then when it's 2.5 hours, then it might have to carry over the next weekend. So while it might not be yet realistic for me to feel personally like I can't work at home, I've really tried to make a limited time frame for that to happen.
And on that note, take the maximum grades that you need to take, and that really shuts down your grading. And I remember we talked about that. So I take 7 and 2.
I was at Middle School South till 6:30. I had tears in my eyes one night, and a fellow teacher came and said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm still grading everything." And she said, "What is important this week? What is the most important thing this week?" Because at the end of the day, we have a minimum amount of grades that we have to have. And that's what, the expectation is. And so sometimes we feel like, because we want to give the kids feedback, and we will, good teachers will find a way to give feedback, but, kind of looking at what's the most essential.
Yeah. No, I love that. Y'all supporting each other as you're planning and delivering your presentation. That's really what it's all about.
Well, and sharing these ideas, that's another thing we really want from this podcast, right? Is to have teachers be supported and hear things that they're like, oh yeah, because we get the best ideas from each other. We really do.
Yeah. Well, just thinking of some of the things you've said, I know recently here at Bernie High School, thanks to Lauren Sanders and Heather Shannon, and is that the Student Service Committee or Student Hospitality Committee?
Hospitality, that's it.
Yeah, so they have, we've started an affirmation station where we are affirming students that teachers want to send a positive note to, and then we also are providing time if there's a staff member. And so both, we've been getting feedback It's been very powerful, and just kind of really, well, I delivered teacher ones yesterday, and this made my day. Like just a little statement, and so that's something we're doing. And then kids, just hey, we noticed this. You're going through this, or you're doing really well at this, and we're glad you're here. And that goes so far. So many good responses on that. So I think that.
And I'd like to say, so Lindsay is the one who, that's what she does, right? She writes a kind email to parents every week. And she's like, I just do one a week, but then by the end of the year, how many did you say?
36.
36 kind emails of positive feedback.
To a specific student?
To a different
like
student.
One student. Okay, yeah.
And I just remember being like, that is so, it's just one email.
One.
And then now that we've implemented this at Bernie High, what I've noticed is now I'm looking for reasons to write a note to the student. And I've only done it twice now, but it's rewired my brain to look for the good, especially in those students who typically don't get the highlight. So I'd like to just say that it really is powerful.
Yeah, and it's impactful in the person that's doing that as well. So like that ties in, like you want to have fun, but you're sharing gratitude for someone else. It also impacts you. So I guess we'll kind of wrap up. I have a quick little thing from an educator that I follow a lot. Kacey has heard this a couple times, but I'm going to say it because it ties into what we've kind of talked about here. And his name is Manny Scott, Dr. Manny Scott. If you're not familiar, he's part of the Freedom Riders from LA. And he great story, but he's an even better speaker and better human being. And he tells this story because we're talking about how do we engage our students. And in his training, teachers are like, well, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make him drink. And he's like, you know what? You're right. And then somebody, and this was up in Fort Worth, and somebody stood up in the back of the audience, happened to be an old rancher, said, you know what? You're right. You can lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink. But what you can do is you can throw some salt on their lips and make them thirsty. And so his thing is be salty. And so my thing, and I used it in a PLC last week, we need to find the salt. What's the salt? And if you find that, and so I just want to leave you with, Jordan, I hope you continue to find the fun that will translate to your students as they continue to enjoy your classes. Kelly, continue to fill your mind with positivity because that will impact your students' outlook on what you're doing in your class. And as you continue to express gratitude, Lindsay, your students are going to notice that and feel that, and y'all are going to have an impact much larger and longer than you may even realize. So just want to thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
For being such exceptional teachers and for putting this out there. Because it really was huge, and teachers need this, so thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I'd like to thank Coach Eisenberg and our AAVTC students as well. Thanks for all your editing and support with us, and stay tuned for our next podcast.
Bye, guys.